Hello and welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I'm elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. Thank you everybody for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. Going to kick off today's episode with just a couple Mars Society announcements. Reminder, if you haven't already registered or signed up, the 2025 International Mars Society Convention is scheduled for Thursday, October 9th through October 11th. That's a Saturday at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. This year, we are celebrating the 28th year, and the theme is Mars, the Time Has Come, which will focus on Mars exploration, human settlement planning, and cutting-edge space technologies. If you're interested in sharing your insights, there is still time. You could submit your abstract to the Mars Society's website by Friday, June 27th. It's 5 p.m. Mountain Time for consideration. So we hope you register for the event. We hope to see you there. And if you've got some insights to share, please submit your abstract. I want to remind everybody as well that the Mars Society is still running our capital campaign to upgrade the Mars Desert Research Station, MDRS, in Utah, which is a vital habitat for scientists, engineers, and students to simulate life on Mars right here on Earth. Your donation will directly support critical improvements for this research facility, and every donation does include a special perk to thank you for being a part of the mission. So go to the Mars Society's website. You can see it right there to learn more and to contribute. All right. Well, excited to welcome today's guest. This is somebody that I've actually had a couple opportunities to connect with through Thunderbird and through the Mars Society, but excited that I get to speak with CJ Jannette, who is the co-founder and president and CEO of BlackStar Orbital, a cutting-edge aerospace company developing reusable modular satellite systems for rapid deployment and recovery. He is a U.S. Air Force veteran and has served in the military, which earned him multiple commendations, including for his role in the 2011 Fukushima disaster response. In the private sector, he has contributed to major projects at SpaceX and NASA, including Falcon Heavy, Artemis 1, Starship, and the commercial lunar landers. At BlackStar, CJ has led efforts to revolutionize satellite technology, tackling challenges like space debris and high mission costs through innovative hypersonic reusable systems. He is also active in the space advocacy realm, like us all, as the founder of the Mars Society's Orlando Space Coast chapter, and is working to grow BlackStar's presence in Arizona with a new manufacturing and test facility. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Wow, that was a lot right there, but you did get it all. Thank you very much, Ashton, for having me today.
Of course. It's hard to put, a life's work into a short bio, but tried to hit the high points there. And just so excited to be chatting with you and looking forward to learning more about your background and BlackStar and kind of what's on the horizon for you.
Well, absolutely. I think you really hit those highlights right there. BlackStar Orbital is a Space Coast-based company that has made some significant inroads into Arizona. We are happy to report as of this week, we are the recipients of a direct-to-phase 2 that has gone live, which is fantastic because what that means is we get to prototype. We get to actually do the real thing now. As is the case for most startups, you do have to collect your engineers. It's endless amounts of engineering documentation, renders, studies, market engagement. But those right there don't actually build a satellite. What builds a satellite is hardware. And to build hardware, you need money. So we've been able to raise about $500,000 in the past year or so. And now with this direct to phase 2, it really is all systems go for our small team. We're thrilled to be doing this. It is an 18-month period performance, which means as we continue to go through that, we're happy to give you updates. More or less, people have asked us, well, what exactly are you doing for the phase 2? It's a few things, namely the flight application and validation of the BlackStar as a reentry craft. As we've seen, we're getting really good at building satellites. We're getting really good at building planes, but space planes are still a rare commodity in this world, which is unfortunate because, as you guys can see with the versatility of platforms like the X-37, there's definitely a use case there. We would like to see BlackStar exist as a more or less a subscale commercialized X-37, which is to say if your original space shuttle was your cruise ship, the X-37 and Dream Chaser are your yachts. We really are trying to build that speedboat so small sat customers can choose to go with us instead of being hardware and bus developers themselves. On a final thought there's a lot of great companies out here in LA this week at the Space Tech Expo down in Long Beach. Many companies have to be, whether they're designing the next generation sensors, whether they're designing next generation thrusters, and they want to be an OTV, they all end up having to be satellite builders, which ultimately takes resources and time away from the things that really set them apart in the space industry. So BlackStar exists to serve that as their platform for reusability.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to dive more into that. I've got, of course, a couple questions, but want to start the episode the way that we always do, which is a segment called Question of the Day. It's just meant to be an icebreaker. I promise there's no right or wrong answer. Just want to hear your opinion. So today's question is, if you could pick any special payload for a test flight, what would it be? Options unlimited. You could pick any.
So this is not a multiple choice. This is an open answer question. Any specialized payload, if it can be anything, can I choose myself? Can I be the payload that is going to Mars or to space?
Absolutely. Okay.
I'm gonna go with this one. I'll be the payload on this one.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I already see we've got some laughs by the response. I love it. I think I remember you saying this. This was last August when you met with the Thunderbird group and you were talking to us about BlackStar, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember you saying something about sending like engagement rings or wedding rings.
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
One of the things that BlackStar is pioneering is this concept called direct consumer payloads or retail payloads. What we see in the space industry is typically either government or commercial. Those are the two big ones. That's 99.99%. But as we're seeing with this renewed interest in space beyond your traditional, let's say, communities that are involved, that's so people who tend to be STEM aligned. This provides an opportunity for anybody to have a piece of the high frontier. Wedding rings are a great example. Business cards, we've also had that. So the product that Mars Society gets to hear first is the development of what we have called the Space Box. We did a market study on Space Box back in 2019. We got absolutely inundated with interest for that. We had interest from everybody from Space Fund to some of the other heads of the companies out there in the DC area. And what we learned is this. People would love to have something ordered online, shipped to their house. They get to put what they like to put in it. So, for example, not too dissimilar from the 23andMe business model. Yeah. So, for example, wedding rings are business cards. They put it in there. They ship it in the mail, send it to us. We have brokered deals to get that flown to space. Now, people might be saying, there's not much scientific merit to these retail payloads. But imagine what if you did a citizen science experiment. Or if a university or even a high school researcher was able to, put something in orbit that allowed them to, have some kind of research end. Perfect example about why that might be important, Ashton. The EpiPen, as researchers have found out, and you know where I'm going with this. EpiPens become toxic in space. Their chemical composition changes due to exposure in the microgravity environment, and it ultimately translates into greater risks. So. Let's partner with companies that are looking to space certify things to go up there, because not only does that drive interest from your retail customers, that drives interest to people who would like to directly purchase things to go up, but it also drives interest for the growing number of commercial space station companies that will be operating there. And being that the space stations will be bringing a new and diverse set of commercial astronauts to the station, there is, I guess, a different consideration than your typical astronaut, which usually is a military professional. Fighter pilots working from checklists, extremely intelligent, extremely analytical. But when you have commercial astronauts, they might be up there for any number of reasons, which means that their needs will be different, which provides an opportunity to not only provide them a new class of goods and services, but because those goods and services may have an interest assigned to that, anybody should be able to purchase that as well. So with the Spacebox program, we're looking forward to a launch in the very near future, like shockingly near future, like so near that nobody would believe it. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait until probably the day of But just watch the socials. It might happen as early as next week for the first Spacebox missions going to the International Space Station.
Okay, I love it. Well, now I've got something to look forward to. Socials is the best way to see that announcement happening?
For all intents and purposes, it will be on the wire when it does occur.
Okay.
But the important thing I do want to impart on your listeners is if they have something that they would like to bring to space, if you're either a researcher or you're just somebody who has something personal, please reach out to us. We'll give you the full rundown, and it'll be really exciting. So yes, Ashton, bringing personal effects to space is something that we see as an important and critical step. And it part of actually, I love it. Somebody said this to me. I hope I don't slaughter it. It was, what do you give the person who has everything? You give them their space. So with Spacebox, that's exactly what we're looking at doing. Is it a bit kitsch? Of course, but it also bootstraps demand and becomes a enhanced and evolved program as we translate from your traditional individual retail payloads to things that could involve biomedical testing, research and development. And then the final note on this, because I love talking about Spacebox, it's been the topic of the week here. If you're to bring up a consumable to the space station, they can use that, but now you have a Kaizen style shadow boxed that you can then put your research studies or your research samples in that same unit, and then it can get sent home and shipped back through standard intermodal shipping. Why is that important? For space to become accessible, we need to make it more affordable to people. So this really exists as a way to make space more affordable for new classes of customers, because most of us, I think, are quite accustomed to standing on the sidelines and watching this amazing space revolution happen. I say let's bring space to the people, and let's all be a part of this.
Absolutely. 100%. I agree with you completely there. And it's exciting to see where the space industry is going right now with the emergence of so many commercial companies. We're seeing a lot of startups, and I had a question for you about this, so maybe now's a good time. But talking about like the reusability aspect and driving down costs. Let me pull that question up because I want to make sure that I ask it. So we're seeing that reusable launch, orbital tech are keys to lowering costs. What breakthroughs are you most excited about in this space, and what are some of the hurdles that you're still trying to tackle?
Absolutely. When it comes to some of these key breakthroughs to enable, let's say, BlackStar, for example, we are very excited about obviously research and breakthroughs into thermal protection systems. I was lucky enough to be on contract with the SpaceX team several years ago in the early iterations of the Starship program, developing just that, working on the thermal protection down in Cape Canaveral. Every step of that manufacturing process was the most enlightening experience of my life. Well, one of them, but it was an amazing experience to be, as I like to say, in the house that Elon built. But with the birth of my third child and no longer being able to give 70 to 80 hours a week for somebody else's programs, I ended up taking a job at NASA, working as the lead hypergolus propellant engineer on Cape Lease 2. I did that before we launched BlackStar. But back to your question. That's a difficult one because there's so many breakthrough technologies that need to happen, Ashton. We are no longer the premier nation where we are first among equals in the technology race. We now have near-peer adversaries who are beginning to, I guess, in so many words, eat our lunch when it comes to the R&D that's being achieved. Our tier one adversaries are looking to win. It's for far too long, America has stood on their laurels in terms of that brand, that breakthrough R&D. We need to see updates in structures. I would love to see if anybody can create an aerogel-based structural member that combines the best qualities of aerogel in terms of thermal and weight with the structural integrity of something like carbon fiber. That's a wish list item, though. That material, to my knowledge, unless it's locked away in a lab, does not exist. But maybe, and when it comes to other technology that makes it very exciting for us, maybe an artificial and a next-gen LLM can figure that out. Maybe our AGI companions that will all be assigned or will all be purchasing in the next, say, 3 to 5 years, if that, will be there to help us solve those major problems. I don't think space, and to tie it into Mars development, I don't think this can happen without a robust, let's say, a robust rollout of AGI Eventually, we will get something akin that we would call artificial superintelligence. I don't know if we'll call it that when it arrives. But what we will see are these effective tools that allows us to more efficiently accomplish our engineering goals. So absolutely thrilled to be, doing our small part of that. BlackStar ties into that by providing a hosted microgravity research payload for dedicated missions. You don't have to buy a ride share on a larger vehicle. We can do a dedicated mission for, a fairly competitive rate because it's small enough to go on a ride share, such as your transporter missions or your bandwagon missions. If there was a first part of that question, can you please help me out with that, Ashton?
Kind of the key to reusable launch and how that's helping to lower the costs as it relates to BlackStar.
Okay, absolutely. Again, I think thermals are going to be the biggest challenge that we'll be facing throughout the course of this 18-month period of performance and beyond. We know that reentry vehicles happen. A third one from a company based out here in LA recently landed a capsule in the Australian desert. That team really does exemplify that small reusable spacecraft can be a new use case for customers. So, it's amazing to see that we're in an early and new revolution when it comes to reusable platforms. The one thing that I think differentiates BlackStar, of course, is the ability to land at one of the 14,000 runways worldwide longer than 5,000 feet, because the vehicle is only about 2.5 meters at the end of the day. It's not a large space plane. It very much is a space drone. We call it that for a reason. And the last thing I'd like to, to circle it back to thermal protection. There's challenges right now in, for example, heat soak. We'll be investigating very closely what those models look like as we go and do our final material selections. But I'll tell you what makes me really excited, and I answered a very similar question last night at an investor event, metal ceramics. There's some incredible breakthroughs, and I'm sure your audience probably knows more about this than most people. There's amazing breakthroughs in metal ceramics. I believe that even Starship is now investigating moving from your standard silica-based thermal protection, toughy coated, to something more robust like a metal ceramic. That's amazing, because if anybody's ever held a piece of thermal protection in their hands, they can attest to the fact that has a consistency somewhere between styrofoam and drywall. So it's not a tough material. And if you're looking to survive the rigors of robust, dynamic, reusable space flight, oh my gosh, we got to get better at those material qualities, because the state of the art is not the state of the art anymore. Now we need to go into the applications phase.
Well, I'm curious. You alluded to this. There are, adversaries of the U.S. that are heavily investing in their space programs. The first that comes to mind is China right now. What would you say about the competition right now? We've talked, with others in the past. For example, we've talked with individuals, other CEOs, about the new space race. This is the space race 2.0, and how we are now competing with China. Obviously, the ISS has been announced that it's going to be decommissioned. China has its own space station. They're, making a lunar presence as well, just like the U.S. What does the future look like for the U.S. and those nations that we're competing with to become the leader in space exploration?
It's only heating up. If we did not have SpaceX making launches in the United States, China would be beating us in space launches right now, hands down. Once they crack true reusability, it's off to the races. It's going to be a much different world. We need to start seeing China as not just a near peer adversary, but a peer adversary. It pains me to break that news to your audience, but they've been doing their homework while we've been sleeping in and not showing up at practice. These guys are waking up at 4:00 in the morning and running that extra 5 miles because they know that there's a boxing match coming up. And it's important that we understand that's their mentality. That's what they're bringing to the game. And it's important and behooves us as both American citizens as well as innovators, if we're so lucky to be in that position, to innovate, do what we do best, come up with the next generation products, grow the GDP. America is still ahead in many areas of GDP. But ultimately, it's going to be a very close race. There's a lot of unknowns right now in the American space industry. We don't know who might land on the moon anymore. And that should terrify everybody because we all know what happened in the Cold War. The minute that the Americans landed on the moon, the Soviet Union was at its zenith. It never recovered from that. Every successive incident that happened after that in its history, from Afghanistan to Chernobyl, perestroika, everything. I'm not a historian, but you can look this up. They peaked in there, and a lot of that was lucky. A lot of that was luck on our part. Had Korolev survived his surgery in 1966, they might have been able to bring their N1 to the game, and then we might have had a real space race. But history isn't written by the television writers; it's written by the victors. And this isn't for all mankind. That was the illusion I was trying to make. This is the real deal, guys. Right now, the Chinese are putting together a very robust lunar development program. They partnered with the Russians to have nuclear reactors to power their bases at the South Pole. And if you look at their renders, they're very much tracking with what robust space development looks like. We need to be doing the same. I'm raising the alarm bell, as should others, that we need to step up our game in terms of what our lunar ambitions are, because Mars is counting on that. If Moon doesn't happen, and sorry, Elon, I will respectfully disagree on this, you need the Moon to make Mars happen. If we go straight to Mars and neglect the Moon, what the Chinese will do is they will use the Moon as their base of operations to build and research a 3-day flight away. And we will essentially seed an important training ground for what is the real prize, and that is Mars. What I would hate to see is we go all in on a very small Mars base that is struggling to survive. Meanwhile, the Chinese turn this into a national imperative. So again, raising the alarm bell, United States, now's the time to act. We can beat them, and we can beat them hands down by embracing your innovators. And then we'll find out what happens in the NASA administration as well.
Yep. You hit my next question, which was, how do we stay competitive? What are your thoughts on the recent changes with administration, the proposed NASA budget cuts? Amidst those budget cuts, how does the U.S. remain competitive and the leader in the space race?
Well, this is definitely a concerning time. I will say that if there's one silver lining in this entire situation, it's that America does have a new space agency. It's the United States Space Force. What we will likely see is a realignment in NASA's goals involving R&D. So NASA will focus strictly on deep space development, the high capital intensive, high risk, long-term high reward objectives and endeavors. But there's a short-term problem, and that's climate research. I say that's a problem because people obviously are very concerned about that. Taxpayers are very concerned about that. So whether you take one side of the climate change discussion or the other, what really does matter is that people do take it seriously. People do want a clean environment, and they like to have a virtual heads-up display to know what the health is. If you have a kid that is sick and you don't have a thermometer, you don't know what their temperature is. You might want to know that as a parent. So really just taking that, that stance, we will be finding out very soon who the next NASA nominee is. From what I understand, there are some great ones, but we're of course losing Jared Isaacman, and that's rough. I think that everybody wanted to see him be the administrator from both sides of the aisle. So, we will have to see how that goes. My long-term prognosis, though, is I think it's going to be amazing. The future is going to be awesome. We're going to figure out however this new budgetary reshuffling is going to work out. Certainly everything works, as everybody in America knows, on 2 to 4 year time horizons. And that means that as we learn, we have the ability to pivot. We learn what works. Maybe we tweak a few things, adjust a few things, and move on. Because ultimately, the future is coming. What that future looks like really is up to me. It's up to you, and it's up to your listeners and everybody beyond. All outcomes are undecided until they're decided, and that's usually done retroactively.
Well, I like that you said, it's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to our listeners. As a CEO and a Mars Society chapter lead, how do you see the grassroots advocacy mission and all of us working together to, accelerate the mission to Mars and advocate that this is something important to us? How do we go about doing that?
We're no longer in the theoretical phase. It's time to put theory into practice. Mars Society is well positioned to have the resources and the researchers needed that we can start running down real world procedures and training. I would love to see if Elon is bringing up to 1 million people by mid-century, And that's only a few decades away. And as we know, those of us in our 30s, time moves a lot quicker than we thought. That means that it'll be here before we know it. That's important because how are we going to safely train these people? Many of us listening today are engineers. I'm an engineer. My colleagues are engineers. That's how we started our careers. Sometimes in fairly dangerous environments, you need well-trained personnel there. I don't think buying a ticket to the Martian homestead will happen until you have an army of well-qualified people and their humanoid Tesla Optimus robots working together to really build out these next generation systems. But again, I'm optimistic. I think this is where we can realign with NASA's objectives. NASA's not cutting any funding towards Mars. Mars sample return is becoming a CLPS 2.0. And for those of you who don't know what that means, there's the Commercial Lunar Program, where it's essentially a service contract where NASA, instead of doing their own lander program, is effectively paying companies like Firefly, like Orbital Machines, and iSpace to go ahead and land, do the mission, justify that investment to your shareholders and customers, and we'll still have our NASA console in the room, making sure that everything is, up to, the clean NASA white standard. So again, I think this is going to work out for everybody if we can just figure out what that looks like. And we won't know until we have the new NASA administrator. But with the Mars Society, we're not NASA. We don't have to worry about that. We know what we're great at. We know what our mission is. I think MDRS, Flashline Research Station, is really the critical pieces of this puzzle. We should be putting teams through that. There should be corporate training. This should be part of any commercial astronautics program. And when we do that, not only will we remain competitive, but we'll show our tier one adversaries that we don't need to do this through national programs of government employees. This should be something open to anybody who's talented and well qualified to make the mission happen. So we got the resources. I'd say let's expand them. Let's turn the Mars Society into the conversion system for taking Earthlings and turning them into Martians. And we do that through a robust, more or less a boot camp using MDRS, using these resources at our disposal. That's at least my personal thoughts on that.
I love it. And I think you're going to have the support of Dr. Subrin and James Burke on that one. Speaking of having highly trained, talented individuals, leading that charge to get humans to Mars, it sounds like there's reminiscent of kind of a military operation. And you've had a background serving in the Air Force, leading projects at SpaceX and NASA. How did your military background shape the way that you approach innovation and leadership in the space industry?
That's a huge one. First of all, working with, in the field that I was, ComNav avionics, when I was, a 20-year-old kid, I really did treat that as my undergraduate experience in some ways. And it did set us up for some unique experiences in the future, especially as a foundation for a systems engineer. Now, there was, when you were saying that, Ashton, one thought did come to mind, actually. So in 2011, I was stationed in Tokyo, Japan. It was about March 11th, and we had just finished up an exercise. As a PTL at the time, I think I was out there at the track, timing some people's runs, and then I had the rest of the day off. So I go up to my dorm room at the time at Yokota Air Base and go lay down. I must have been maybe resting my eyes for about 5 to 10 minutes. Suddenly the room starts shaking. Everything starts shaking. So we go downstairs. I go meet up with a few of my colleagues. We discuss what happened, thinking there's a minor earthquake, maybe like a 6.5, pretty rush, I'm from California. This is, it happens, Ring of Fire and whatnot. And then somebody says, there's a huge tsunami coming just north. We were inland, so we don't have to worry about it hitting us, but it's going to take out the airports. Oh yeah, that's interesting. So I go upstairs. I go watch the live video footage of those waves, the footage from the helicopter where they're sweeping across the farmlands. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is happening like 200 kilometers north of us. Mm-hmm. And then they said Narita and Haneda Airport were shut down. And I immediately realized we have an en route squadron. We have an active air base in Tokyo, and those planes coming in have nowhere to land. So me and my buddies, we threw on our uniforms, ran down the street as quickly as I could. Then at that point, I think I saw one of our leads in a large white box truck. sees me, knows I'm here on my off shift, says get in, opens the passenger door, and then I'm there. And then for the next 4 months, we were more or less handling the contingency operations involved with the earthquake and then eventually the Fukushima Daiichi incident. Why was this important? Well, at the time I was reading a couple of books that were important to me. Buckminster Fuller's An Operator's Manual to Spaceship Earth and Abundance by an author named Peter Diamandis. That just came out, very much tied to the technology industry, the accelerating rate in which compute and all the things it enables will make all these amazing things happen for everybody. Okay, that's pretty cool. Seeing all this chaos happening. Thank God, working as an aircraft maintainer, there's troops who deployed downrange, and they had their own experience on what it was like for the duality of technology that can be used for good, like a nuclear reactor, or technology that can be used for bad, like a nuclear bomb. So it was in really that time, and those events that were juxtaposed that really did have a serious impact. And I bring that up because I don't know if my track with doing startups and the things that we were involved in would have played out the same way had that not happened, even with those same baseline, dreams of, getting into aerospace, and doing, eventually joining a space company, maybe starting one. I don't know if everything would played out the way it did. I met one of my closest colleagues during that incident, somebody who's worked with me on a number of these startups as well, Nick. And I could just keep going. It really is something that I think we're all defined by those turning point experiences, right, Ashton? I mean, you must have had those on your journey. Every single one of our audience members, more or less, has those defining moments in their life that they could tell, one heck of a story that would totally blow our minds, right? And that's more or less what everybody is carrying with them. What we do with that knowledge is a different story. What do we do in face of the fact that you saw basically the Fukushima incident, not up front because you don't want to be that close, but you more or less actively engaged. There was more stories that I'd love to tell another time. I don't think we'll have the time in this interview or this podcast, but yeah, I think that's my answer.
So what was the impact of that? How did that lead you or influence how you lead now at BlackStar?
Absolutely. Well, that other experiences I had in the Air Force at the time, and of course beyond it when I had my first company, those all were defining moments. One thing that I always found is that just like it is for baseball or playing music, you need to find a group of people who you can connect with, where everybody more or less can begin to intuit each other. You can understand what your colleague is saying before they say it. Which is great when you're in a startup meeting with, say, an investor, and you're looking, and you're trying to figure out, what exactly should really be said next. And one of your team members comes up with that perfect 2-sentence answer, and all you can do is point and be like, couldn't have said it better myself. And so those are lessons that learned me everything was tied to that, Ashton, in many ways. There was no single incident, but I will say is through working in the Air Force and leading teams, and then getting out of the Air Force, working on teams like Ripple Aerospace, being the chief engineer, being the lead hypers engineer for Capely's 2 at the Space Center. That was a huge one. Or even learning from great leadership. That's the other thing. Working as a contractor with SpaceX was amazing because the people who are on that program, when there are 7,000 applications for a single role, they have the pick of the litter. So there's something to learn from every single one of those people who went through. Many of whom I still keep in contact with to this day, actually, funny enough. So it's really cool to have been working on this career and on this career track. It ties back to the Mars program. But at the end of the day, I will say this: as an engineer, we should be ready to work in any environment. I'm glad that we're not in a different industry. We've been having a much more boring conversation.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you on that as well. It is the final frontier. I mean, it's everybody, when we talk about space, I'm sure you experience this, and because I know that I do, and I'm not a CEO. But whenever people say, "Oh, what do you do? What are you into? What are you passionate about?" and we talk about space, and people's eyes light up, and they just get so excited about what's happening, even if they're not in the industry or they're not experts on the various companies and the technologies. They're still excited about what's happening. And so you're absolutely correct. It's this is the most exciting thing we could be doing. But you alluded you alluded to SpaceX, and so I of course wanted to ask. You worked on those projects: Falcon Heavy, Artemis, Starship. Were there any lessons that you learned working on those projects that you've incorporated into BlackStar Orbital?
Oh God, yes. Managing escape operation is a terrifying experience that one should never take lightly.
Okay.
When I would bring the new hypergol engineers on deck, one thing I would do is I would show them it was basically a printout of every major hypergolic propellant incident that has happened since the 1960s, and that was one of the things they got. It's like, let's not add our name to that list. And then, of course, the other thing that I really did learn in that experience is from I'm sorry, I'm going to age myself a little bit. I'm 39. Okay. But when I mean the old timers, I mean the guys who were there since like if not the Apollo era, like right afterward. Your early shuttle vets, I think, would be a perfect example of that. And learning from them, they'll tell you some stories about how it used to be out there. I don't think NASA would like me if I said it on a live thing. But back in the 70s and 80s, there's a very different environment. Their standards were different. I will say that as far as how this generation manages itself in the engineering environment, we have a new breed, and these people are not only sharp, but they're consummate professionals coming right out of the engineering programs. They don't like to wing it. They don't like to cowboy it. And I'm speaking specifically about the hypergols world, working as basically, if you ever see the guys wearing those white spacesuits coming up to a spacecraft, and there's going to be an engineer sitting console somewhere telling what valves to pull and what to do this, what to do that. And that's what we did with our team. We did that for, multiple missions. So when I get to say, I worked on all this, laundry list of launches, it really was, directly with the engineers on staff for these various satellite platforms, coordinating with them as a mission team member. And you really can't buy that experience. You can't learn that in a university. It's really about getting in there and just getting your hands dirty. Does not need to be at NASA. Doesn't even need to be at a space company. It just needs to be an environment where you feel that your technical and personal mettle are put to the test. And one thing that nobody wants is to go home with one less person. Casualties are a thing in this industry. Oftentimes, engineering safety documentation is written in blood, and it's important that as engineers and that we realize that. So not to take us into a bit of a dark and serious tone there, but it very much is true. Some of the biggest takeaways that I learned is how to take care of our people, how to take care of your technology, how to avoid it, being a part of the next anomaly right up, or at the very least being the person doing the anomaly investigation instead of the one being investigated. And those were some critical lessons that we learned during that. Also learned how to enjoy a good rocket launch up front. I don't think you can beat those views from Pad 40 from the payload processing facility, especially when you have those all those sound waves basically reflected back at you from that giant metal wall you're standing next to, because you'll learn to experience, I think, and appreciate rocket launches from a different perspective, something that our Space Center people know very well, and oftentimes probably better than I do, just working directly, hands-on with the rocket engines and whatnot. But it's incredible stuff. I will say that we are in a new world now, Ashton. So I would expect that, in about 10 to 15 years, as you continue to do this on your track, the stories and the technology, the people you'll be interviewing will only get more interesting. And more, I think, era defining. We're definitely in that evolutionary spike, to allude back to Peter Diamandis and of course Ray Kurzweil.
Well, you were saying that you get to watch those rocket launches. So when we spoke before, I remember you saying that from your office you got to see some launch pads. I don't remember exactly which. You have a presence in Space Coast, and now we know you've got a presence in Arizona. Can you explain what that is? What's the partnership in Arizona that's happening?
Well, thank you very much for bringing that one up. We have a small office in downtown Titusville, about 15 minutes outside the Kennedy Space Center. For those of you who have been lucky enough to visit the Space Coast and visit Titusville, that's where you get that great footage of the rocket pads from way across the water. So from the back of our building, we have an unobstructed view of the VAB, Pad 39A, Pad 39B, some of the new construction going up. And it's just right outside the back of the building, not as close as we were on the Space Center, but when you're in Central Florida, you really are blessed. So it's just a matter of how blessed you really are. And then there's Arizona. Don't want to forget that part. So we're on a 7.3 million capital investment contract with the Arizona Commerce Authority. That is not in the form of liquid capital. Nobody's giving BlackStar a check and just saying, here's $7 million, here you go. No, it's in the form of workforce development credits, capital expense credits, say, for example, buying a CNC machine. There may be a tax implication on the other end of that, which is favorable, and more or less working with the Arizona community. And I have to say that it is amazing to be working with Arizona because of how warm and how welcoming the community is. The Arizona Space Commission is headed by Brett Meekum, and his amazing and phenomenal team of commissioners are doing great work. And that's, by the way, Ashton, that's how we connected through our relations with Arizona. Because with the Thunderbird School, I had my bachelor's degree. My undergraduate was with Arizona State University, go Sun Devils, and I ended up going off to Johns Hopkins after that at APL for a while. But with Arizona, $7.3 million capital investment will be down in the city of Sierra Vista. This is important because you have the base there that has a very interesting mission, which you can look up yourself. I don't want the black vans to come and get me. But they do some interesting stuff there that is in relation to national security. They also have a airport, which they're looking to become a spaceport. They've received their money from the FAA. They will be one of America's newest reentry sites down in about an hour and a half from south of Tucson. So it's a beautiful spot in the desert. It very much is your own personal Area 51 if you want that to be. So that's really exciting to have a startup with that backing. Everybody on the state, both sides of the aisle, have been amazing to us. When we speak about Arizona, I have to, of course, relay my appreciation, gratitude to Governor Katie Hobbs, as well as Senate President Janae Shamp, as well as Dave Gowan, Frank Carella, and the rest of the team there. They have been more than willing to take our phone calls, to answer our questions. And Arizona really is, I think, the hidden gem, the dark horse, if you will, of the space in the aerospace industry. You have Texas. I don't think Texas is going to be Texas. Okay. They're just going to be there. There's also Florida. Florida has it. You have California. So really, Arizona is between Texas and California. So to differentiate itself, it really is, going all in on advanced aerospace and defense. It has a range there. There's many programs that are very interesting if you want to learn more about the Golden Dome program. But ultimately, and you can look up yourself, there's a growing community of aerospace companies there. You have Paragon, you have Phantom Space up north, you have Catalyst, and many others. Too many to count, and we're getting more all the time. But ultimately, I can boil this down to three things, Ashton: people, proximity, and potential. When it comes to Arizona, we have amazing people, former employees of Honeywell and Raytheon who understand hypersonic missiles. You have proximity to the base, to the major universities, whether it's Arizona State or U of A, and then the potential to grow. You have an amazing community, both the Space Commission, the State Senate, and others that are very welcoming to innovation. So the potential innovation, I'd say, is unlimited in Arizona. It's also the Sun Belt. So going from Florida to Arizona, one would always expect there to be nice weather. Got to count your blessings where you can get it.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see that Arizona is really leading the way. I mean, behind some of those other, space states, that they're really investing in space companies. They're making it attractive, and then they're providing those incentives to bring those companies there, to create jobs, to develop the economy in those areas. So it's very exciting. Congratulations on that deal with Sierra Vista and getting their airport. It's really cool.
Thank you very much. And that's where we will be executing our period of performance for this direct to phase 2 that we mentioned earlier. So we're excited about it. We're going to have some space drones at our own little Area 51 out in a beautiful part of the country. And I really couldn't ask for a better partnership with the state of AZ.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time I'm in Arizona with Thunderbird, maybe there's an opportunity to come by, and I would love to see it.
We can do an on-location interview.
Let's do it. Yeah, we'll schedule that now. What do the next 10, 15 years look like for for BlackStar Orbital. What's on your roadmap? What are some of the maybe benchmarks, the milestones that you're wanting to achieve, and what do we see potentially in the future for low Earth orbit, beyond to the moon? Like where's the future for BlackStar Orbital?
BlackStar Orbital envisions a future where thousands of hypersonic satellites are operating in and returning from low Earth orbit, whether it's to support the Artemis program by putting one of these or a version of it on a lander so it can get fueled, or so it can get stocked up with material and sent back. Whether it's delivering your next generation communication systems because we have the ideal constellation deploying, or the constellation replacing satellite bus. Really, the future is unlimited. BlackStar Orbital exists, obviously, to have a revenue-generating product. I would say that there might be some technologies that we'll learn along the way that might be very interesting to consumers of all types, maybe not even space consumers. But ultimately, at the end of our day, BlackStar Orbital is here to be a robust space development enterprise. I love the fact that if we can just get 1/3 of the satellite customers to switch to a platform like BlackStar, what that means is space becomes dynamic. It becomes something that everybody sees every day. Reentries should be as commonplace as landings. Wouldn't that be an amazing sight? I mean, if the satellites are going to be up there anyway, okay? And our view is obstructed for our telescopes, which, gosh, I hope not, because I love a good night sky, especially northern Arizona.
Yeah.
You can at least bring them back and have a nice shooting star where it's not space. But in all earnesty, we do see this as a company where we're exploring new market verticals all the time. Really, this can meet any needs of the small sat operators. So no matter what your modality of spaceflight is, whether you're an Earth observation company, whether you're a communications company, whether you're downmassing, R&D, BlackStar is really modeling itself, and it's evolving as we're discovering live. As much a deep tech company as it is a logistics company operating in the space environment, which is really cool, because that means at some point on Mars, you'll probably be able to order up a space box from Earth. It might take you 6 months, but you'll get a thing and you'll get what you need, guaranteed. So, I mean, this is really interesting. This is a really interesting question. The most important thing I would say that for any founders or any CEOs listening is, just maintain your team, try to maintain your cap table the best that you can. And most importantly, keep driving new products that people need. One thing that we had a conversation about with our team a few months ago, I think we might've been in Colorado Springs for a symposium.
Mm-hmm.
I looked to my co-founder, Sean, he's our COO. And I say to him, space is important for me and you. It's important for about maybe 100,000 employees. It's important for some, millions of Americans. But what about the 7.8 billion other human beings that aren't the lucky 200 million that see this as valuable? How do we reach out to them?
Yeah.
And that really is the question all of us need to be facing. If space is going to be limited to us getting, cheap, fast satellite internet, maybe GPS solution, or just those, some really great video footage that we can see on our computers, I think we're underselling ourselves. This really is a place. This really is the unknown. This really is the unknown continent. People call the moon the 8th continent. Well, I'm going to call outer space the 9th continent, because there's so much to explore there. There's so many worlds that we can't even begin to understand just how beautiful they are, because there's no eyes to witness it and see it. So maybe in a sense, our job as human beings on this planet is, if we really are the universe knowing itself, we ultimately become the universe's awareness spreading throughout itself. And, I think a sterile universe is a very sad place. We should offshore the biosphere and green the cosmos. And ultimately, if BlackStar can be part of that journey, then I'd say our job was a job well done.
I love the vision. One of the things that you just mentioned was space junk, and that turned on some light bulbs for me. I'm currently part of my Thunderbird program, working on a research paper right now on space debris. And, through some conversations, there was a little bit of disagreement on how big of an issue space debris is. And, through my initial research, like on the NASA website, just about the potential number, the volume of space junk that's out there. Can you just speak to that high level, like from your experience and expertise? how big of an issue is space junk in the next, 10 to 15 years? Is it going to be a potential more significant issue? Is it going to be something that is not really at the forefront until there's potentially a cataclysmic type of event? We see a Kessler effect type of situation. But anything that you can share about space debris would be super important, because right now I'm writing a research paper on it.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to add some notes to that. What we can do right now.
I welcome it.
And by the way, this is considered an official citation. So with space debris, even if Kessler syndrome is not the immediate risk, there is going to be a risk in terms of bringing people in private satellites up there, because the space junk problem is exponentially increasing. Even in the 1980s, they were getting pockmarked in their windscreen from pieces of paint in orbit. In the 1980s, like a long time ago. That's only getting worse. I think that some of those risks might also be regulatory, from what I'm seeing. And I think that folks like maybe Brett Meekum and George Pullen are fantastic experts to maybe follow up a question with. But next 4 to 8 year time horizon, as more companies have to provide a debris solution, there will be costs incurred with that. So we might see penalties for companies that aren't properly disposing of their satellites. There's also a new risk, and that's environmental. What happens if we're sending millions of tons of debris into the upper atmosphere? Those oxides, those lithium-ion batteries, the hydrazine, everything getting mixed up in a giant fireball. And because the atmosphere gradients, I'm not a climate scientist, but you have the thermosphere, and you essentially get like a temperature inversion layer to where it gets really, really cold and it gets really, really hot. And so that spot where it gets really, really cold, the warm things that are the things that are deposited in the warm space can sit above that layer.
Okay.
So now we've just introduced a new variable to the climate question. What happens when you're not just putting CO2 into the upper atmosphere, but you're burning metal satellites, you're burning silica satellites? They might have hydrazine on board. So I see this as a long-term issue, because even if there's no immediate and direct risk to human health or property, there might be a regulatory risk to companies because you have national governments who are answering to their constituents. And if their constituents and taxpayers are not happy that an industry is operating a certain way, then those end up getting translated as to costs for companies. So I did want to approach this answer from a different perspective. Many of us are debating whether or not space debris is going to happen or not. I see it as an untapped resource. I see this as something where people put a lot of money into this hardware. Gold is not cheap. Platinum group metals aren't cheap. Why can't we repurpose it? And there's amazing companies involved in that space right now. Some companies that come to mind, they at least tangentially involve, KMI, Cislunar Industries, teams that are looking at, how to do orbital foundries, how to do space debris collection. I see those as synergistic companies that can work within a larger ecosystem of companies trying to solve this problem. But again, it really is up to all of us. How big of a problem will we let it get before it becomes everybody's problem? And there's a clock on that. I don't know if that timer goes off in 10 years or 100 years. But when you're dealing with a closed system like low Earth, well, it's not technical. Well, it's closed in the sense that it's orbital, right? If you impart a delta V, it's going to stay in that orbital lane, and it will slowly decay over time. Throw it high enough, and it'll be up there for longer than any of us could realistically conceive. And that's a problem, because we're essentially making it somebody else's problem. So do I see it as a resource? Yes. Do I see it as a risk? Probably. Do I see it as a regulatory problem that companies will be faced in the future? Absolutely. And which, if you do the math right there, makes orbital debris a problem that needs to be solved. BlackStar is solving it from a different direction. We would like to consider ourselves non-debris generating, waste not, want not, bring back what you take with you. And that is exactly our model. Part of why we love it is it's only $15 million for a brand new satellite, but it's $1 million to refurb, and you can have as many relaunches as you'd like. Launch price is notwithstanding, but nobody's making money off that unless you're a launch company. So that's a different equation altogether. Strictly speaking, for the BlackStar platform, this vehicle essentially pays for itself in 3 flights. And excited to be doing this. These are going to be missions that will be proliferating, and we will be seeing other companies doing platforms very similar to this. Other countries doing platforms very similar to this. Some of those countries may be friendly. Other countries maybe not. So Pandora's box has been open. Space drones are a thing, and now it's time to stand and deliver. And we will be doing that through this upcoming 18 months.
Yeah. Do you think that's the future? I mean, with the BlackStar Orbital approach that, you're going to bring back what you take with you. Other companies may not be following that model currently until a regulation is in place that requires them to do that. Those companies may not have a life plan for those satellites as they decay. Other countries may not have that same plan. The U.S. may say that, hey, space debris is a priority for us because we want to protect our assets. But if other countries aren't following that, then maybe we're at odds with, call it China, for example, that's not as concerned with the space debris. How do we tackle that at an international level?
Well, I think that this is why we need to have an evolving set of norms and standards with how we're operating, this new international space community. A lot of that starts with dialogue. The Chinese are just as worried about the Kessler syndrome as we are. They have aspirations of space development, and those aspirations will be just as hampered as ours will if we let this problem get out of control. But I 100% agree with your point, Ashton. I would also point out that we are now in a position to where, with the internet and with the ability to do direct translations, we should be sharing ideas, not technology. What I mean by that is, if there's a way to solve a problem that affects everybody, let's solve it in an international forum. Whether it's brokered through the U.S. State Department or UNUSA, if we don't have an evolving set of norms and standards, that could be very bad. Because if, for example, if the Russians figured out that a space capsule in a pure oxygen environment was a highly flammable and dangerous environment, they did not share that information with the early Apollo program. And then Apollo 1 happened. So, let's do what we can to avoid, those Apollo 1 situations in the future, especially if there's certain parties who have information that can save lives. They can protect their national assets. They can protect their property. That's fine. Let's try to take care of people while we're addressing the national pride situation.
Is that how we bridge the gap with those countries that are currently considered adversaries like China? Is not necessarily a technology transfer, but
definitely not.
Information.
Yeah, I think that it's a proverbial big red phone, right? Even at the height of the Cold War, the president of the United States can have a direct line to the premier of Russia or the Soviet Union's premier, right? I think that's a great way to avoid World War III.
Enough said. Yeah. Again.
So take that for what you will. We're in an interesting time. This is a very competitive world. So obviously we are looking at how we could play how everybody's playing their cards close to their chest. But when it comes to orbital debris, that really is an environmental problem. So we have to treat it much like we do the oceans, just like we do the air that we breathe. Orbit really is almost like the common heritage for everybody, right? There's no Chinese designated orbital layer. This isn't the American sector of MEO. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It very much is a common space that we all need to, play well in. Or our parents did not raise us very well if we can't play well with others. So it behooves our national leaders to, find those ways to, make things safe, because again, if we can do that, that also buys us time to, figure out, the real solutions to the big issues that involve, other elements of national security. If we're about to make a major breakthrough in space and we get our orbit denied because somebody did an ASAT test that they shouldn't have, we will be very upset. The international community will be very upset. And those researchers who now are, denied the freedom to move in orbit will also be. So, this is going to be an interesting world that BlackStar is really, stepping into. We see an evolving set of norms happening right now with the new space economy. Here in the U.S., we are exemplifying and we are leading the charge for that new space economy. I do believe that we have a strong advocates on both sides of the aisle, from the White House on down. And the question is, whose side is Mars? Instead of asking, what side the Mars Society is on, we should be asking who's on the Mars Society side. And that's why I'm thrilled to be a part of the team. That's why I'm thrilled to be doing this at BlackStar Orbital. let's go. Let's make it happen. Let's make space something worth living in.
I
And
love it. I love the enthusiasm. You're so optimistic about the industry, about BlackStar Orbital, where the industry as a whole and all of the space economy is headed. So, that enthusiasm rubs off on us, and so I'm excited as well. So, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and answering all of my questions, including a few that were kind of unrelated or maybe a little bit outside of what I was originally planning to chat with you about. So, thank you for the help with my research paper.
Well, you're very welcome. I had a great time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'll see you out there.
Yeah, we'll see you. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up the way that we always do. Special thank you, Chris, for joining today. Special thank you to our Executive Director, James Burke, our PR Director, Michael Stoltz, our friends at Liftport. Thank you, Leah, for helping today. And then want to thank everybody that tuned in. I know we had to reschedule today, so thank you, everybody that was still able to connect and listen to today's conversation. And as always, the best is yet to come.